So it boils down to your problem, your question. The questions are your problems. Mr. Kenneth Leung. I'm a member of the Bills Committee on the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2017. When it comes to the revenue or tax related bills and other bills dealing with financial matters, I will always be very involved. And we members of the Bills Committee have worked very hard on the bill and their proposed amendments. So some 20 or 30 hours ago, the government suddenly said that they would like to invoke a Rule 40 bracket 4 that at the committee stage. Without notice, they're going to move for an adjournment. As other members have said, this is a very special situation. The last time it was invoked, the same rule was invoked, was 17 years ago. And today we hear no substantive and good reasons why suddenly Rule 40 bracket 4 has to be invoked. I oppose to this sudden invocation of Rule 40 bracket 4. There are 4 reasons to back me up. I won't repeat the reasons already expounded by other members. First reason. In the past few years, I spent a lot of time on bills. I scrutinized the provisions, the clauses very carefully. I understand that time is very limited here. As at this moment, we don't know how many bills will be tabled by the government in this council within the current session. I still haven't got all the information because members have to make arrangements on how to use his or her time. This year, FSTB alone would need to present more than 10 bills. Most of them will be time essential. Why? Because bills tabled by FSTB usually have to do with our livelihood and our financial system. Such bills represent our international obligations. We cannot afford to say no to taking necessary action. And now we have only limited time to proceed with second reading or third reading. If a bill is passed only 6 months or 9 months later, it would have a adverse impact on us. We have seen 5 revenue bills so far. There will be 6, and legislative time is always limited. I've heard from Mr. Ting-kwong about his agreement to the government adjournment motion as chairman of the Bills Committee. The motion is about the adjournment of the committee's proceedings, but I have not heard from him, from Mr. Ting-kwong, any substantive reasons, but I won't speculate. As chairman of a bill, I will, of course, very keen to have the bill passed as soon as possible. I'm the chairman of another Bills committee. Many green groups would like to have that bill passed. And certainly we don't want to cause any delay to other bills, because this current stamp duty bill has to be postponed, leading to some losses. For example, if we cannot fulfill our international obligations, in some cases we may be blacklisted. Maybe the blacklist on money laundering, or the blacklist on aiding and abetting tax evasion by multinational corporations. So that's the first reason why I cannot agree with this motion on 40(4). Legislative time is limited. We have many bills, and we have international obligations to fulfill. Second reason for opposing to the adjournment motion. This would make it even more murkier in terms of the message we send to the market, which is already very messy. Mrs. Carrie Lam once said that for residential properties, they are not commodities. It's a necessity. They are necessities. We want Hong Kong people to have decent housing, etc., etc. So she was sort of suggesting that we should do things urgently for the benefit of Hong Kong. She thinks the cooling measures are already very strict. This is the fourth measure, the fourth attempt to change stamp duty rates to ask speculators and investors to pay higher stamp duty. So Mrs. Carrie Lam thinks that we are already very strict about this. Maybe the fourth measure that's before us can be deferred. So that will be the second message we send. And the market will be very puzzled. Yesterday, the government said the discussion should have to be suspended. The committee proceeding will have to be suspended by relying on Rule 40(4). If you really think that Hong Kong people should be entitled to the decent accommodation, this bill should not be deferred. Some member would say that it's subject to negative vetting, is already a deterrent. But don't forget, the message circulating in the market would tell investors, speculators, and estate agents to join the market, and that will lead to escalating property prices in a frenzy. We have introduced three measures on stamp duty. The private residential price index has increased by 3 times. In 1999, the index was 100, and in the first quarter of 2013, it's 237. In 2015, it's 289, and the index rose to, and I'm talking about private property price index, it rose to 115 in 2017. These are demand-side measures. 3 measures were introduced, and they have come to nothing. Would the 4th measure also be futile? If the bill is considered useless, you should withdraw the entire bill, and no more discussion should be made of it. We can see from the financial data, these measures have been found to be rather ineffective. And according to a Swiss bank report published yesterday, it's a report on Asian wealth. among 11 cities, Hong Kong, in terms of livability index for the upper middle class, the living cost is the highest among these. Living cost of Hong Kong is on the top because of the high housing costs. But if you defer these cooling measures, it's really inadvisable, and I cannot accept it. If today we continue the discussion of the bill, I think we would have passed the bill at this point. The bill would have been passed today.
This very mixed message sent to the market as one reason for my opposition to the adjournment. Another reason is also many colleagues here claim that we should put the economy and our livelihood issues first. But why should we give up on this very important issue to our economy and livelihood, all because of a non-binding government motion to be moved on the 25th of October? Well, it's the co-location arrangements. It is a political mission. So from an economic point of view, the XRL is not going to be profitable. But because it is a political mission, many members here would like to obey 100%. So we should let the economy and livelihood issues take precedence. I urge members in this council never use the excuse of using politics to override the economy and livelihood issues. Well, I think they are doing this for the sake of political correctness. Undoubtedly, that is the case in front of us. All right, the fourth reason why I believe it is inappropriate to defer the deliberations of the bill today is for better executive-legislature relations. The CEO could have announced in September that in the second sitting, I'm going to introduce a motion on co-location arrangements. At this point, we could be discussing this non-binding motion on the co-location arrangements. The new term of government claims that it would have a new style of governance, but why should the agenda be changed at a short notice of 25 hours? Of course, President, I respect your authority to amend the motion in accordance with our RoP. I would like to clarify, I have no right to amend the agenda. You mean? No, I am saying that you believe that it is in line with our RoP. You allow the government to amend our agenda without any notice. Now, if you would like to invoke 44, I would have to allow. There is no need for my approval. No need for your approval. No approval for me is needed. Please don't say that I am colluding with the government. Please turn to RoP 44. Yes, I've already have it opened. But you need to explain. I believe. Yes, you are entirely correct. I'm not challenging your decision. You said that I have a position. Does that mean that I can disallow such a case? Well, if that's the case, the president would have enjoyed much more power. So please clarify. Please don't give the public or members to misunderstand me. A point of order. In accordance with RoP 40. President, I remember you're directing me that what we said here, what we say here need not be facts. That is his view. Yes, what you say here may not be facts, or the majority of them may not be facts. But then Mr. Kenneth Leung is saying something about the president, so I must clarify. In other words, if the statement is judged to be wrong by you, if it is not fact, then it will be overturned. No, this is not a point of order. Please sit down. All right, I'll continue. President, I was driven out of the chamber because of this RoP, so I want you to clarify. No, this is not a point of order. Please sit down, Mr. Wen. Let me clarify. I have no intention to accuse you. What you have done is entirely in line with the RoP. Are you happy? It's not a question of whether I'm happy or not. I just want to point out that your accusation, no, I am not accusing you of anything. Let me reiterate once again that what you have done is entirely in accordance with the RoP, if I understand. So are you satisfied? President, can you say, please, once again, whether you're happy or not? Well, this is your time. Please continue. Of course, it is my time. In terms of executive legislative relations, I believe the president has a role to promote relations between the two bodies. So, President, I hope you can do a little bit more. Use your charisma, your ability, and enhance your role so that in this council we can examine bills and motions from the government more smoothly. And allow me to raise a point of order, and this is about the official languages in this chamber. Now, if a member put a question during Cantonese, shouldn't you respond in Cantonese? By the same token, if a question is put to you in English, shouldn't you reply in English? And if somebody present a question to you in Putonghua, shouldn't you as the president respond in Putonghua? This is not a point of order. It isn't? Mr. Andrew Wen. Thank you, President. Although I'm still pondering the art of thinking on the part of the president, I'm still not clear, but never mind. I will ask you to enlighten me again in the future. I still believe that you have double standards. I hope you won't take it as a criticism. As members said just now, that we have to speak because the government is too brutal, it's too rude. This new government, this Carrie Lam government, said time and again that she's tired of political bickering and she would like to put the economy and people's livelihood worse. She would like to improve exco-logical relations, and she is tired of rifts in society, and she also said that she didn't feel happier because she was not respected. I think this is a good example to illustrate why she cannot have our respect. This stamp duty amendment bill is a very substantive bill. But because of the co-location arrangements, and we're also worried that the government is trying to buy time to amend the RoP, and therefore the government would rather sacrifice this bill, which is very important to people out there, to owners who are swapping flats. And she is totally careless of their plight. Whether it be the public or members will feel that we are being manipulated by the government in order to pass a non-binding government motion on co-location arrangement to amend the RoP so that in March, before the by-elections, these tasks can be accomplished. And even the EAC has hinted that the by-elections might be rescheduled because of the CCP and MPC meetings in Beijing. When Carrie Lam ran for this post, she minded very much that she was called 689 version 2. Let me confirm this. Usually version 2 is an upgrade from version 1. She looks pleasant and cordial. In fact, she has hidden agenda. She asks us to enter into a dialogue with her. She wants to be pragmatic and deal with tasks. But what have we seen in recent days? This is what we have today. Turning back to the stamp duty amendment bill, the purpose is to apply flat rates of 1.5% and then to give exemption to first-time home buyers to ensure the people who change flats can enjoy this 6 months concession period. Some may say that it's going to be useful, some may say not. Nevertheless, many members in this council, whichever political parties they belong to, believe that it is good enough. On the 14th of December, we're told by the administration that there will be further enhancements because of the tight housing supply and the persistently low interest rates. Our property prices was now out of tune of our economic fundamentals, and therefore we must curb speculations. We must have demand-side management, and therefore the SSD special stamp duty was introduced, and starting from April 2016, there was a substantial rebound in the residential property market. Starting from 2016, for small and medium-sized flats, the market was very exuberant. And there was a great demand for flats for investment and speculative reasons. And then there existed property bubble. These were frequent warnings or reminders from officials from the Treasury or from the Financial Services Bureau, and therefore they would like to improve the stamp duty regime. Members from the pro-establishment camp and the Pandems reached an a consensus that the amendment bill be passed ASAP so as to dampen the overheated property market, residential property market. So the government claimed that this matter was very close to its heart, and all of a sudden is calling a halt to the whole thing. And I think the community understands that it is to make way for the co-location arrangements and to buy time for the RoP to be amended. So don't we owe the public an explanation? And as for deferring the discussion of the bill, I'd like to know to what extent. Just last week, the CE announced her maiden policy address. She introduced a lot of measures, but if we examine them, they are not going to be effective. She is not adding bread, and she's just playing musical chairs with what we have. And there is still an imbalance in supply and demand, and therefore the government should consider that the objective factors are just the same and things are worsening, and this property bubble should not be allowed to continue to grow. And because of political motive, the government has decided to defer the discussion of this bill, and I think we have let the public down. Mr. Alfred Young gave us some statistics. If you don't mind, repeat them once again. According to the R&VD Department for grade A flat that is those smaller than 40 meters square. In August, it's over 16,000 per square foot in Hong Kong, and 13,000 in Kowloon, and 12,000 in NT. What is the median wage in Hong Kong? 15,000. So you can see how shocking the prices are. Given that we're all in deep waters, the government decides to put politics first. We should deal with the opposition in this council first. Let's amend the RoP first. Let's deal with the co-location arrangement for XRL first. We're still asking for data. Mr. Frank Chen is not here. Well, at the last meeting, I was asked by Mr. Chen to be more pragmatic. I asked him on information about Futian. He could have given us a direct answer, but he has chosen to evade the question, and he scolded us, saying that we were not being pragmatic.
Some media sided with me to prove that I was right, and they revealed that Mr. Frank Chen and the government did not do their job. The Futian station is certainly completed. It should be discussed in the context of the co-location arrangement for XRL. Since there is an ample discussion in the public and the government has not prepared enough information, the Democratic Party conducted a study recently, and we are sort of in a limbo. And the number of objectors increased by 1%. Should we really shelve this stamp duty amendment bill in favor of the motion on co-location arrangement? You are trying to force it through to justify yourself, and you are trying to say that the public supports the co-location arrangement at West Kowloon. If that's the case, I have another suggestion for the government. They should visit the district councils again. And this morning, for the oral questions, Mr. Matthew Cheung said they had visited the district, so you should do it a few dozen more times. There's no use dodging the reality. You have to face up to it. For this stamp duty amendment bill, there's very little difference between the Democrats and pro-establishment camp. Even with the property curbs in place, the shelving of the bill means that certain deficiencies, for instance, buyers would only have a grace period of 6 months instead of 9. This is exactly the concern of Mr. James To and Mr. Holden Chow. James To said he was even willing to support Mr. Holden Chow for the benefit of the public. So why is the pro-establishment camp siding with the government, which would jeopardize justice and at the expense of the public? I'd like to know how long the government intends to drag this on. With the withdrawal of the bill, well, there have been some people saying that the bill will be back by December. We already have the agenda, so the government simply has to copy and paste. It wouldn't take time at all. The committee stage for the bill can resume within a number of days, so why wouldn't the government consider that? And I'd like to elaborate on what Mr. Kent Leung said. when we examine the double stamp duty, more than $1 billion worth of tax revenue has accumulated in law firms, which is a substantial risk. If these firms go out of business, these revenue would be in danger. And in July, we have seen that happening. So I hope we pay some attention to that. I hope the government would right their wrong and stop manipulating the procedures at LegCo in order to serve their political purpose. They are, or else they would be contradicting themselves, and the Carrie Lam administration will show the public that she is only another version of Mrs. 689. Mr. Lam Shek-ting. Chairman, I'm not in very good shape today. My apologies. Excuse me. For the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2017, I regret that at very short notice the government decided to withdraw the bill. This bill is very important. As the government themselves said, Hong Kong's property prices are sky high and they are out of line with the economy. With the long-standing shortage of housing supply, together with the ultra-low interests and with substantial mainland capital arriving in Hong Kong, that led to rampant speculative activities, and as such, Hong Kong's property prices have skyrocketed. The government has all along been saying that the property curbs can help dampen the property market, and they can also dampen short-term speculations. In her policy address, Carrie Lam said that the housing issue is a priority in terms of people's livelihood. When we talk about the housing situation, I'm sure we would agree, based on the property prices, that it deserves more attention. If this is really so important, why has the government decided to shelve it? They said they want to focus on livelihood issues, and when we talk about constitutional reform, they said let's not deal with that now because we need to strike a consensus and they need to study the sentiments. So for this very important livelihood issue, why are they withdrawing it? They are withdrawing the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill. Can't the government see that property prices are still going up? The hike would also lead to an increase in rents, and this would affect every sector of the public. Hong Kong is in irregular shape, and it's getting harder and harder to buy properties. And in the 1970s to 60s, we had comedies showing mini flats where people had no space to move at all. Now it has become a reality. The rental market is equally crazy, and most people cannot afford rents. At Shek Wu Hui, I'm the district councillor, and I visited people living in subdivided flats, and for a unit of less than 100 square feet, the rent is $5,000 to $6,000. For people living in Shengshui, most people are grassroots. It's not, they can hardly afford such expensive rents. Call for quorum, please.
我提醒議員，
I'd like to remind members that at this session, when you speak, please focus on whether you support the Secretary to, in accordance with RoP 40 bracket 4, seek to adjourn the proceedings of a committee. You should not be discussing the housing policy of Hong Kong as a whole. There will be 3.5 days in the future for you to speak on various issues in Hong Kong. Mr. Lim Chak Tang, Madam Deputy, I would like to be as focused as much as possible. But when we discuss this, we have to discuss how urgent the bill is. Why? Because housing is indeed a serious problem in Hong Kong, and many members of the public are not adequately housed. So that's why I have to speak about the housing issue in Hong Kong. Please understand this. Madam Deputy, members of the public have high expectations on Carrie Lam's policy address. They hope that she can put forward effective measures to address the housing issue in Hong Kong, and they hope that property prices can be in a healthy state. Carrie Lam has come up with a lot of different programs, for example, the Green GSH and also starter homes. But then the housing supplies remains the same, and whatever she does may not be able to improve the problem. There isn't a big increase in the housing supply, so the market responds correspondingly, and property prices are still on the rise. When the market is getting more exuberant, and since the government has this cooling measure, stamp duty amendment bill, why shouldn't it be submitted and discussed as soon as possible? The government said that it wants to withdraw the bill because, number one, they want to propose their own CSAs. Second, they want to deal with the co-location arrangement as soonest. I find it very baffling. Do the CSAs have to be handled by the government? No, that's not the case. We have our own convention, and many times the CSAs are proposed by the members and are passed. The government may support them sometimes and not others, and the government can state its own stance on these. To my understanding, the two members who are concerned about the bill are Mr. Holden Chow from DAB and Mr. James To from the DP. Also support changing the statutory time limit for disposing of the original property from 6 months to 9 months. And I don't see any major objection within the council towards this CSA. Even the government itself said that they are considering whether to support such a relaxation. Since this is the case, why does the government have to withdraw the bill and propose its own CSAs? Why can't it allow members to move the CSAs? If you say you don't want Mr. James To take credit for moving the CSAs, then that's all right. You can allow Mr. Holden Chow to move the amendments, and Mr. James To can agree to them. Why does it have to be the government which moves the CSAs? Second, the government says that it wants to deal with co-location as soon as possible. Number one, well, this motion on the co-location arrangement is going to be a non-binding one. Must we pass it before the deadline? If that is not being done, will the world comes to an end? According to Mr. Rimsky-Yun, maybe has forged a consensus with the mainland authorities. There is a 3-step process to implement co-location. First, the mainland and the SAR government have to reach a cooperation arrangement and come up with an agreement. Second, such a cooperation arrangement agreement has to be decided and approved by the MPCSC. And thirdly, we must draw up our local legislation to implement it. That's coming from the government. Mr. Rimsky-Yuen has talked about this three-step process. So how does the non-binding motion fit into the three-step process? I don't see how it fits into this process.
It is certainly not reaching an agreement with the mainland, and we are not the NPC, and this is also not local legislation, so it is a non-binding motion. Why do we have to make way for entirely unnecessary non-binding motion on collocation arrangement? Whether we pass the non-binding motion or not, we all know that the central government plus the SL government have their minds set on the collocation arrangement. It will for sure be implemented. So I have reason to believe that this is not the genuine reason behind this move. The genuine reason is, as the pro-establishment camp has said a number of times, they're going to substantially amend the RoP to curtail filibustering by members. The suggestions from the pro-establishment camp are very scary. They are really draconian measures. Some of them have nothing to do with filibustering. For instance, using a petition to set up a select committee to investigate really serious matters like suspected the conduct of Xi Wanlong in accepting UGL money, and all we need is 20 members to stand up in a sitting to ask for a select committee to be set up, so that even though we cannot have invoke the electoral powers and privileges ordinance, we can look into matters of grave public interest. You call that filibustering? It is not. So why do you want to deprive of our very limited power to monitor the government? Mr. Lam Chak-ting, we are discussing whether we support that the motion be adjourned. I mean, the council adjourned. Now, if your remarks are not related to this motion, then I will rule them to be irrelevant. Thank you very much for reminding me, Madam Deputy. Perhaps I have digressed a little bit. I apologize. Madam Deputy, of course, we have to oppose the government's adjournment motion because, as I said, housing is a pressing issue for all of us. Allow me to say a little bit more. I'd like to say this to the government and the public. Our housing market is very dangerous. If we allow our property market to be so exuberant, then everyone in Hong Kong, including this government, have to pay a price. In 1999, when I first graduated, we had the aftermath of the Asian financial turmoil. I was assistant to Mr. Albert Ho of DP. I helped to deal with thousands of cases at Tai Hing Estate, Tuen Mun. Because of the burst of the property bubble, they encountered tremendous difficulties. including economic difficulties. They were out of job. They saw pay cuts. They could not repay mortgage. They had their property recorded by the banks, and they were asked to pay the price differential. And many of them had loans or debts up to millions of dollars, and many of them could not afford the down payment, and they had to ask family members to be guarantors of their mortgages, and some asked their relatives to remortgage their flats to support them. So there was a rippling effect. We must not forget this part of our history. If we forget it, then should the property bubble go burst, given its very exorbitant state, the fall will be very substantial. So we urge the administration to pass the amendment bill ASAP so that the measures can be introduced to dampen the property market. We must not allow the market to continue in this frenzy. Otherwise, there will be a major collapse of the property market. Your time is up, Mr. Lam. Dr. Kwok Kai-ki, Madam Deputy, I speak to oppose the motion, and that is the motion under RoP 44 for the motion to be adjourned. At the start of this term of government, Mrs. Carrie Lam said that she didn't want the rifts in society, and she wanted to show that she was very different from C.Y. Leung. The last term of government claimed that housing was its top priority. It introduced a very controversial demand-side management measures. They might not be very effective. Still, it was a stopgap measure for the very heated property market. Now, this term of government claims that it put livelihood issues first, and Mr. Frank Chan, the Secretary for Housing and Transport, should look at how we can curb speculation, how we can lower property prices. Here he has decided to withdraw this bill. Instead, he's going to introduce a non-binding motion on co-location arrangement, which has no urgency at all. Why should we give way to the co-location motion? This council cannot represent public opinion. We have half of the members being FC members, another half from geographical elections. How many of them can really reflect the wish of our people? The government knows full well. What Carrie Lam should do most is to give us a proposal for general universal suffrage so that the C election and LC elections can reflect the wish of the people, and we can have genuine universal suffrage. However, she has not done her duty. We ended up having a proposal that is in accordance with the A31 decision by NPCSC, and she dares to use this council to pass a non-binding motion on co-location arrangement. This is shameful. She hasn't tried to make right this very distorted system, and she has used this council to pass a highly controversial arrangement regarding the XRL. This council or this government has used political prosecution to strip disqualify members returned in GCs. The government is having it its own way. We cannot change it given the current political system, but it should not use this council as a tool. She has no mandate. She has not consulted the public in putting together this co-location arrangement. We all know that the government is lying. Even the media has exposed that the facilities for a co-location arrangement were ready at Futian. How could it tell us that it was not prepared to do so at Futian? And what justifications does it have for adjourning this motion on the stamp duty amendment bills? Since 2016, we have seen a major rebound of the property market. And in the third quarter of 2016, the situation was out of hand. And from October 2016 to August 2017, where there be type A, B, and C units, whether we're talking about those smaller than 40 square meters or those are bigger than 70 square meters in size, the increase in price has ranged from 10 to 11%. As released by a Swiss bank recently, Hong Kong is the most expensive city to live in the world. For tycoons and wealthy people from the mainland, it doesn't matter. No matter how expensive it is, they want to come to Hong Kong to loan money. They want to launder their money here. But ordinary members of the public do suffer. The government claims time and again that it wants to dampen the heated property market. In the last session, the government criticized LegCo many times that we did not put important livelihood issues first. And yet, this is exactly what the government is doing now. It is oblivious of the plight of the people. Real estate agents may be saying that this bill is now shelved and there is no telling when it will return to the council. And the message to the market is you can continue to speculate in the property sector. Perhaps the more the better. The government knows what the government is doing. The government pays lip service only. And this new housing policy from the government is outrageous. The supply of PRH is not going to increase. It's just juggling with the supply to create an illusion. So the government has come up with these measures, cooling measures, because it could not do anything about it. And yet it is going to remove these measures. And what has the government said? He asked the body and soul of young people to split, and then if you cannot afford a flat, you might as well buy a car. If the government is really sympathetic to the people, if it really attaches significance to housing supply, it should really not have done something like this. We've spent so much time on the amendment bill. Why shouldn't it be passed? The earliest, the better. The earlier, the better. There is no major controversy between the pandemics and the pro-establishment camp. It's just extending the grace period from 9 months to 12 months. There is no need for this show staged by the government. When the majority here from both camps agree that a grace period be extended to allow property owners to dispose of their flats. We're talking about a lot of money. Let me cite an example. A 700 square foot flat, if the full stamp duty be paid, it could be over 2 million. But if it is at the rate of 3.75%, he can easily save up to $1.5 million. So for ordinary members of the public, they want to change from a 300 square foot to 500 square foot flat. So it's just a slight upgrade of their living environment. And all because of the adjournment motion here, they will be very unsettled and worried. Some members say that perhaps the co-location arrangement is not really the most important thing. And even perhaps they really want to curtail the power of this council. That is the hidden agenda. LegCo is the only body that can monitor the executive. And if we do anything to undermine the power of this council, we will then let down the public.
唔係直斥其非話政府係做得唔啱，仲要係扮鵪鶉唔出。
Our legislators are not speaking out against the government, or even they are remaining silent. The pro-establishment members talked about helping people who wanted to exchange their properties. Isn't this what they said? But now they are silent because they are given an order saying that something else is even more important. So you are letting the voters down. The government is taking the lead in doing nothing, and the pro-establishment camp is following suit. You are being instructed to sit, to stand. So what's the point of you being legislators? This is shameful. As we watch property prices go higher and higher, and our properties are being purchased by non-Hong Kong people, and when you look at Kai Tak, sites were sold off to mainland consortiums one after another. And one of the owners intended to sell the units to their staff only. The government is saying that it's good to increase housing supply. For the third quarter land sale program, the government only offered 1,090 units. How about the shortage in recent years? How about people who are paying very expensive rent and waiting for units? The property prices are insane, and yet there have been oversubscriptions by 200 or 300 times, and the government conveniently ignored them. And they are withdrawing the stamp duty amendment bill in place of a non-binding motion with no urgency at all on the co-location arrangement. So can you not even wait another week? Would that make you very uncomfortable? If you wait one more week, does it mean that you will not be able to implement co-location? Who are you trying to kid? LegCo has become a tool for the government, and you are asking people what to do. You are issuing instructions on how they should vote, on which items they should support, and so on. I want the public to see how the pro-establishment members react today. Perhaps the developers or sellers who are waiting to profit would be happiest at this news, and they said they would the government said they would come back in December, so they can speculate for another 2 months. But the government is busy with other things, for example, amending the rules of procedure, and that would take another few months. So what can the public do? How can the government say that housing is a priority of the current administration? And they are coming up with irrelevant ideas like light homes. They are asking people to convert their units into 100 or 200 light homes. They are not focusing on what they should. And you are forging a false crisis. What is the government actually doing? When the former Secretary for Transport and Housing proposed this motion, he explained why the curb is needed and how it would operate. But the government might realize that all the probably curbs are in vain. Like what Mr. Abraham Shack said, the speculations would just continue. You would be stupid to believe in the government. Perhaps the government knows exactly that. Would you admit that you are deceiving the public, or all these measures would not work? The property prices will still go up and there would be no housing. Thank you. Dr. N. Chang. Chairman, according to Rule 14 of the RoP, the clerk should give notice at least 14 clear days before the day of the meeting to members, and I have been here all day at the chamber, and we had about 20 legislators, but only 2 or 3 members were here. I wonder whether they received any notice. I'm just concerned about their safety. Mr. Siu Ka-chun. Thank you, Chairman. I'm against the motion to adjourn proceedings of the Council. At about 4:45, I received a group of students from the Queen Elizabeth Secondary School. They asked what I learned as a legislator. Indeed, there's a lot for me to learn, including managing absurdities. I told them that I learned something I wouldn't know before. For example, stamp duty. I had interest in stamp duty on whether the property curbs can really dampen the rampant market. I am following it with my watchful eyes. The prices of subdivided units are still going up. I think poverty alleviation is about imposing restrictions on the richest. And now we are on the verge of passing the bill, and now the stamp duty amendment bill is being withdrawn. So I would object to the adjournment of the motion. I wasn't very familiar with this bill, and I spent some time understanding it. My staff also spent a lot of time doing preparations for me, but with this motion to adjourn, it would not be debated today, so all the preparations were in vain. Our efforts have gone to waste, but worse, everyone here has wasted their time. As Mr. Kent Leung said, this is the 4th amendment to the stamp duty, and they have sent confusing messages to the market. A number of legislators talked about the Money Report 2017 published by a Swiss bank, and it said that Hong Kong is already the most expensive city to live in. Our chief executive, Carrie Lam, also made a confession. Earlier, she said that even with her pension, she cannot afford a 300 feet unit in Wan Chai. So he understands the plight of the public. She said that if we do not solve the housing issue, it would cause a lot of she would feel uncomfortable. This is what she said a few days ago at a radio show. She said she would be uncomfortable if the housing situation is not resolved. And 24 hours ago, she said she wanted to adjourn the proceedings and she did not want to debate stamp duty anymore. And in its place, a motion on the co-location arrangement would be would take place instead. So this is really a waste of effort. Mr. Alvin Young said something which touched me. He said the government has an issue with their logic. There are two types of logic. One is normal logic, two is government logic. And I think he is really to the point. So what is meant by government logic? A tyranny and everything is about authority or an authoritarian style. Of course, I realize that I shouldn't sidetrack too much, so I do not intend to explain what that is about. Simply speaking, this kind of logic is like a PowerPoint presentation. What Mr. Frank Chan said was like a PowerPoint presentation. Well, so power takes precedence to a point. That is what I call the PowerPoint logic or the government logic. I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Chan for your PowerPoint presentation just now. Manipulation of the rules of procedure and the council, the pro-establishment members often say that the Democrats are disrupting the rules and order, and they are making accusations for the sake of it. I'm not objecting, I'm defending something. There are a lot of rules and procedures in LegCo. This is not something the government can waive off easily, and the government cannot instruct us to do this and that, and we would not be told to do what the government wants. So we have to defend ourselves, or else we will have more and more of these non-binding motions. Today it's about co-location, and later it might be about the healthcare policy, retirement protection, or subdivided units, and so on and so forth. I know that come the voting, the item would be passed. But I hope the pro-establishment members can help defend this for the public. I prepared this sign. It says, "Please don't kiss my car." I want to give this. I want to give this to every pro-establishment members, and this is an advice to you, because if you stay too close, you might crash. Thank you, Mr. Ted Hui. Mr. Ted Hui, do you intend to speak? Call for quorum.
鄺俊宇議員。
Mr. Roy Kwong. President, why do you have this debate today? Because we have to deal with the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2017. Many friends, including the friends on the pro-establishment camp, would like to pass this bill as soon as possible because that would benefit members of the public who would like to see an improvement in the exuberant market and lowering of the property prices. But what are we debating today instead? Why political issues should take precedence before livelihood issues? That is so bewildering. Now, after so many efforts on all sides, including Mr. Holden Chow, who has proposed this amendment, we are expecting that this issue can be resolved. But all of a sudden, we are asked to give way to co-location arrangement. The housing issue is a pressing one. We must roll out harsh measures, but these are totally ignored. And those who are following the broadcast do not get it. The government would like to introduce a 15% standard ADV rate so that buyers have to pay a high stamp duty so that the exuberant market can be curbed. And this is a good measure because we've been talking all the time. When do you start to save for your house? For a young person, he has to save for 18 years before he can buy his own home because we are facing an exuberant market. And in Singapore, we are seeing that everybody can have home ownership. Through the government's housing policy, people can own a home and they have a sense of belonging to the city. So that's why the government has rolled out a number of measures to dampen the exuberant market. So this is such an important issue, livelihood issue. And why are we not passing it today? Why do we have to adjourn the proceedings? This is so mystifying. If we don't discuss this, what will happen? The bill will be withdrawn. When will it be tabled in the future? Don't know. And the longer the delay is, the greater impact is to those who are concerned. What kind of messages are we giving to the community and the property market? I don't think your rationale stands. The pro-establishment members have been sitting here all day, and you'll have a hard time. But then you have to answer this question. This is a very important livelihood issue. Why does it have to give way? You should not give me an answer. You should give an answer to those who are following the debate alive on TV, and for those who are in the plight, who are aspiring for the government to do something. The government has done something and is also now doing something. But then, at the last minute, the bill is being withdrawn because of collocation arrangement. A non-binding motion is deemed even more important. How can you say that a non-binding motion is more important than this livelihood issue? President, if the government doesn't adjourn the proceedings, now we should be discussing the CSAs moved by the members, and we believe that these will be passed. And after that, we hope that the measure can help those who are in the plight, who find themselves helpless in face of the exorbitant property prices, well, the situation can be improved. That won't happen now. We don't know why the government is proposing to adjourn the proceedings. We didn't even have the chance to discuss the CSAs. What is the greatest impact of the adjournment? Now, there is no way to implement the relief, the tax relief. Now, the government is proposing a 15% standard ad valorem stamp duty, and the people who are buying a property in place of their own property will have to shoulder heavy burden. And the member CSAs aim to relieve the burden of the property owners. And you could have them passed easily here, but you're not doing that because next week we are bound, or we're destined to discuss this non-binding co-location motion. Are you doing any justice to those who are suffering because of the high property prices? How can you be accountable to this group of people? People of different political affiliations put their heads together to come up with these new thinking and CSAs. We are not standing in your way. We are thinking for you, the government as well. We are helping you out. No. Politics prevails over livelihood. That is simply not right. President, the government has rolled out a number of harsh measures, but then property prices are still rising. From the first time when the harsh measures were rolled out to April 2017, the property prices have doubled, and the price could easily cost $10,000 per square foot. And this is considered a very low price. It's a sort of starter prices. This is the kind of city that we are living in, and that's why we have this demand that the government should help this generation, the young generation. The property prices are very high, but then we don't have adequate measures to suppress the prices. As a result, the rentals are also very high. If you visit the districts yourself, if you have $5,000, $6,000, what kind of unit can you rent? What is the starting salary of a university graduate? For over 20 years, the salary level has not risen. Well, maybe you will tell them to rent a unit, but the rentals are also high. We are waiting for the government to act. And we hope that this time, as everybody agrees on the CSA, so we are expecting that something can be done this time. But ridiculously, it is the government and the pro-establishment members are asking for the adjournment of the proceedings. When will the bill come back to this council? You said that the people are in a plight, you want to connect with people. This is what you said you would do. The problem is a persistent one.
President, according to a survey, Hong Kong has been for 7 years in a row a place where property prices are most unaffordable, and a young person will have to refrain from eating or drinking for 8 years in order to save enough to buy a flat. Now, young people cannot become homeowners. As a result, they cannot develop a sense of belonging to this city, and therefore the rift in society is getting bigger and bigger. Now we want to adjourn this debate. I think you are cheating those who don't know what's happening watching this live TV. You want to give a very clear message to the public that the government is going to suppress property prices. But now you're saying that co-location arrangement is more important. You are turning a blind eye to the suffering of people who can't afford homes in Hong Kong. Yes, it's been hard, and you ask us not to have so many quorum calls and not to filibuster. No, I insist on so doing. Quorum call, please.
邝俊宇議員。
Mr. Ted Hui, Mr. Roy Kwong, rather. Chairman. I fail to understand why the government and the pro-establishment camp are being so fiddle. As you all know, with this bill, there would be a glimmer of hope in the property market. If the grace period is extended from 6 months to 9, there will be ample time for buyers to trade their properties. So that would give hopes to the secondary housing market, because it would be very hard to ask our young people to buy first-hand properties. Even the cheaper properties in the new territories would command a rent of more than $10,000. In June, the government said that they are afraid that withdrawing the bill would affect the public, and now it's October, and yet you are not concerned about sending out a wrong message. So how would you explain yourselves to people who want to buy properties? So as the netizens suggest, this is Hong Kong's like a monopoly game where everyone has owned properties already. If you want to unite our society, you have to tackle the most imminent problem. This is not something we would deny. It is very hard for Hong Kong people to buy properties. That's why the government must do something. The government is withdrawing the bill and you are not saying anything. The government said we are going to discuss co-location next week. So you might say they are not saying that this is imminent. Ask your heart whether this is a livelihood issue. This is certainly a livelihood issue, but not a political one. So what is the logic? In the past, we would be having a debate with the pro-establishment members, and now they are not even willing to speak because they don't know what to say. Of course, they cannot say that they support the government's decision to withdraw the bill and that the government should not help these buyers. This would be wrong. Well, I understand that they would be reluctant to do so. So at the end of the day, why are they allowing the government to adjourn proceedings for this crucial bill? We have heard people saying that it's very hard to buy properties, and they have been arguing over this with their beloved family and partners, and this is something we all see. Now look at what the government is doing. You should help criticize them. Are you not going to do anything? People have expectations of LegCo. At least we should do something, even if they might not help much. And next week, you have to discuss the co-location arrangement with Carrie Lam. If you go on the streets, you would see what people feel. And if you do not want the bill to be withdrawn, you should press the button and speak. This is really infuriating. Yes, we are going to make quorum calls. Please stop speaking immediately, Mr. Ted Hui. Thank you, Mr. Lang. I speak against this motion to adjourn. I think there would only be two outcomes. It's either a disrespect to the Council or the government is not being honest in that they have more political motives behind such motion. First, I'd like to talk about the disrespect. The government made it clear that they are clearing the way or the path for something else. Carrie Lam said she made this decision after gauging her priorities. So I have a question for the Secretary. What is meant by those priorities? What is important? Co-location is an important mission given by the country, and the XLL must be commissioned. This is certainly important for you. Co-location is highly controversial. We are talking about our jurisdiction or the loss of it. We are ceding ground and we are setting a very poor precedent, and this is something that goes against the basic law. Some members of the public might not be against XRL, but if you have seen the survey conducted by our party, it's almost 50-50. Some people feel that XRL can bring about convenience. Some would support national integration just like the perception can, but yet there are people with grave concerns. And this is about incorporating certain national laws in Annex 3 of the Basic Law. But according to the Basic Law, there are clear stipulations on what we should incorporate. For example, issues of national defense, foreign affairs, and furthermore, under the Basic Law, there should be issues dealt with by Hong Kong and issues that should not be dealt with by Hong Kong. So you are setting a very poor precedent, and the coming national anthem law would also involve Annex 3, and Hong Kong would be forced to oblige. The country has a mission to the Secretary and Carrie Lam. Are you going to jeopardize or sacrifice our rule of law and jurisdiction? The Basic Law affords fundamental protection to Hong Kong people. That's why I say that this is a disrespect. And in the future, everything can give way if we set a precedent today. Can the Secretary tell me when the government had sought to adjourn proceedings to their own motion? This time they might be doing it for XLL. The next time they would do it for the sake of amending the rules of procedure. And the perception camp will take advantage, and later they can give way for the sake of other atrocious reasons. LegCo has always been playing by the rules, and this time, for the sake of a political mission or other ulterior motives, they are moving this motion to adjourn. This is certainly something unacceptable to the public and the Democratic camp. Now back to the stamp duty bill itself. When I said disrespect, it wasn't only about a disregard for the rules. If you are honest if the government supports Mr. Holden Chow's and Mr. James Ho's motions and that they would be incorporated, the government can move amendments. They can introduce government bills into LegCo, but at least you have to tell us when you will come back to LegCo. The members' CSAs have already been listed on the agenda, and the government just has to copy them. And they can apply for a waiver of notice or exemption of notice from the LegCo president. The committee stage can then resume for the bill. So would the Secretary promise to notify LegCo as soon as possible on when committee stage of the bill can be resumed? If the government is really concerned about the public's priorities, this is just a matter of procedures. If you are being honest, is the real reason that you do not want Mr. James To's amendment to be passed? And are you trying to save face for yourself? If that's the case, you are not respecting legislators' powers to move amendments. Even though these property curbs have been implemented, would they affect bills in the future? I think that's up for debate. Members moved amendments to relax the time frame for property exchange from 6 months to 9. We all agreed, and the Democratic camp agreed with the pro-establishment camp on this. We would support everything that would benefit the livelihood of the people. For other members' motions, including exempting real estate agencies from responsibility, if this is passed, they would benefit right away. Has the pro-establishment camp thought about this? When our chief executive, Carrie Lam, said that she has gauged or juggled the priorities, in other words, she is paying little attention to livelihood of the people. So what are we facing now? We face a shortage of housing supply. Our property prices have deviated from our economy. So for Carrie Lam, all these are not important. There is no urgency, and XRL is the most important. I hope the public can see where Carrie Lam's real priorities are. And between Hong Kong people and mission given by the central government, which is more important for her. So apart from disrespect, you are also being dishonest. This is not about incorporating Mr. Holden Chow and Mr. James To's amendments. This is not just about XRL or co-location, and commissioning of XRL might not be the priority. So I want to ask the Secretary, would 1 or 2 weeks make a huge difference? Would that lead to a delay in commissioning? Is that the case?
Maybe there are other reasons. As I said, you are not just doing it for the sake of the XRL, you are doing it really for amending the rules of procedure. I am questioning your motive, pro-establishment members. You are trying to take advantage of the situation. The government has disqualified 6 legislators unreasonably, and in this interim period, you are trying to take advantage of the situation. And the government will be letting you amend the rules of procedures. I am questioning your motive. The rules of procedures are ridiculous. The Finance Committee chairman can issue a chairman's directive directing himself what to do. Isn't that very ridiculous? You are taking away the LegCo's power to monitor the government. There have been so many recommendations made, including cutting down the number of motions made by members, and well, the member expelled or evicted from the chamber cannot return on the same day. So these are really measures targeting the the Democratic camp members. If these amendments are to be passed, it will definitely cut down on the chances of legislators to question the government and limiting our freedom to have debate on political issues. So all the funding applications can be passed hurriedly, and you are seeking efficiency at the expense of the quality of the work of the LegCo, and this is degrading the society as a whole. Now, in the controversy of amending the rules of procedures, Mr. Ted Hui, I have allowed you to speak on the amendment of rule of procedure, but now we are on RoP 40(4) on adjournment of proceedings of a committee. The secretary said that it will allow for a collocation non-binding motion to be discussed. I've allowed you for to talk about this for 2 minutes. Let me come back to this main subject. When I said at the outset, and I said that one of the reasons why I don't support the adjournment, because it is not showing due respect to the LegCo. And I'm saying that the government is being dishonest. I'm querying the motive of the government and the pro-establishment members, because their real motive is to amend the RoP. They have this very poor or bad motive, and that's why I don't support this adjournment. Mr. Gary Chan, if he follows the rules of procedure so strictly, he should know that the member should not impute motive of another member according to the RoP. Yes, you cannot impute motives of other members. Mr. Ted Hui, please continue. They've been sitting here for so long, and I've been questioning their motives for so long. Well, on what point do they find my remark offensive? You are imputing motives on their part. If you continue discussing this, I'm afraid I have to ask you to stop or retract your remarks. Mr. Gary Chan, can you pinpoint the exact remark that I made before I decide whether I will retract that remark? You said that you are querying the pro-establishment members' motives. That is very clear. So that's I query the motive. That means imputing motives, right? But if you don't speak sincerely, then you may ignore this. But then, as a member has pointed out the issue, I have to make a ruling. Okay, I'll go back to my logic. In moving this adjournment motion, I think the government is being dishonest. Apart from collocation, the CSAs moved by members, well, they have other reasons. I will not use the word motive. These are reasons. These reasons are related to the RoP. So I must set out clearly where the problem lies in amending the RoP. Mr. Ted Hui, I have reminded you that you have digressed. If you continue digressing, I have to stop you from speaking. I'm explaining my logic. You have spent a long time explaining your logic. If you continue digressing, I have to stop you speaking. I have to continue explaining the logic. It's all related. I'm not talking about the RoP itself. I can talk at length about the RoP. You talk about setting up a dedicated committee. I'm not talking about the content of the amendment of RoP. I'm talking about the logic of my opposing the adjournment motion, because I think the government has ulterior motive in doing this. So how come that you said that I'm digressing? This is exactly the reason why I oppose the adjournment. So, President, if these are the reasons behind, I believe that members of the public will have the same query, and they would hope that we can ask clearly the government in the debate whether they have other reasons, that you are being dishonest and you have that reasons that you have concealed. So lastly, if this is going to be a precedent and we are giving way this time, next time when we talk about discuss the amending the rule of procedure, the government will do the same, will give way, and everything can be brushed aside. So how can we discharge our constitutional duty to monitor the government? We will be relegated to a rubber stamp. And I believe that the pro-establishment members have this view of the LegCo all along. So it's not a check and balance between the legislature and the executive. It's rather a relationship of cooperation. Carrie Lam talked about harmony, and she is in fact stifling opposition views. And this is what we are seeing on the part of the government. And it also explains why so many Democratic members oppose this adjournment motion. We have a great distrust in the government. Mr. Jeremy Tam. President, well, political leaders, when they assume office, they can use the honeymoon period to introduce drastic reforms to address deep-seated conflicts. This is the first LegCo meeting after Carrie Lam released her first policy address, and it's the 110th day of her assumption of office. And she is not making use of the wealth left over by her predecessors. 689 CY Leung has a negative popularity rating, while she at least is not having a negative popular rating. And I think she should make use of this to deal with deep-seated conflicts. Maybe she can take forward constitutional reform to resolve political issues, to ratify the stance that is tilted towards those with vested interest. And like this time, using this bill, she can help address the difficulties faced by property owners who would like to change flats. But what did Carrie Lam do during her honeymoon period? She has disqualified the eyesores in the LegCo, and she has given away the immigration policy rights, and she has refused denying entry from of a British politician. She has ceded the precious land in the middle of Hong Kong to the mainland. And she hasn't used this honeymoon period to deal with livelihood issues, but rather she is staging political struggles in this period, and she's trying to achieve political missions from the CCP. And she is dealing with people who raised, who she considered problematic. Now, they under Carrie Lam's allowance, the pro-establishment is moving amendments to the RoP, and they are just towing the line of the CPG. And there is this lawmaker who says the opposition members should be killed without mercy. And many quorum calls have been made today. We may lose ultimately, but we try to fight till the very last minute. we try to change this very devilish plan of co-location arrangement. The focus today is on the stamp duty. To many people, this is a heavy burden. Over the years, there have been so many harsh measures being rolled out, and they have to do with the stamp duty. As discussed in the last session, as I said by the government, they want this bill to be passed as soon as possible. So to do away with uncertainties in the market, and they don't want to give the market the wrong message that no more harsh measures will be rolled out. But after they said this today, they have to brush this aside for the sake of allowing mainland issues to be discussed here. You are ignoring people's interest here. Some people said that if the bill is passed later, it will not have any impact on the property buyers. I must declare that within this period, my family members have bought flat. Now, the difficulty here is, should I consider the 6 months as really the period, the statutory limit, or should I take Mr. Frank Chan's word that it will be 9 months? Now, if the amendment is not passed in the future, what will happen? If you have bought your property at this juncture, you will be at a loss because we don't know what your policy will be. Well, if it is going to be 6 months, then I should sell off my old property as soon as I can. And for the buyer, the new buyer will try to bargain with you because of this. But then, say, if I trust in Mr. Frank Chang that it is going to be 9 months, should I be taking the risk? We're not talking about a small sum. We are talking about 15% of the property price. This is no small sum at all. So for the average citizen, well, they usually save up their entire life to buy a property, or they want to buy a larger flat to provide for better living for their family members. They are helpless. They don't know what to do. Should I be selling my property or not? Now, if I assume it's going to be 6 months, I must sell off my property now. With all these uncertainties, really the government is obliged to deal with this bill soonest. This bill actually was subject to negative vetting, so it commenced operation in November. So those who were affected at that time, then their deadline is May or June. But then these people have already been shortchanged because at that time the government insisted that it's going to be 6 months. They don't want it to be 9 months or 12 months because that would send a wrong message to the market. So because of this, some people might have bought a flat in November when the measure took effect, and now they sold their flat in May, no matter what the price was. Then after summer vacation, because of the co-location arrangement, the government was willing to make compromise of all sorts, and they said that 9 months can be considered. And a lot of people will find that very unfair.
In particular, after the release of the last policy address, what have you seen in the property market? Property prices are rising, in particular industrial buildings. And what about residential units? Prices have also risen. If you have tracked the trend in the past few months. Both the property and stock markets have soared. So if you had really sold your flat earlier, a few months earlier, you might have suffered great loss. But of course, the other side of the story is maybe you think that the transitional period will be 9 months, so you think that you have a few more months as a leeway. Then, however, things might go wrong, but because there is no guarantee that the amendment would surely be passed, if the government wants it, if it wants the public to have confidence in it, it could have retrieved the bill, withdrawn the bill, and introduced a new bill with 9 months written in it. But it has chosen not to do so. So the government wants to control everything. It is blatantly telling us that it would use this means to advance the discussion of the co-location arrangement. You have to bear in mind that the motion is a non-binding one. So why should we give way to it? Why should we give way to it at the expense of an amendment bill, which is legally binding? Even if the motion on co-location arrangement is not passed, what is the consequence? There will still be the 3-step process. Things won't change. So what they want is authority. It wants legislative council to be a rubber stamp to tell Beijing that it has the support of this council. So Carrie Lam has control over everything in this council, whether it be proceedings in the FC or this motion. A point of order. Quorum call, please.
發問號議員。
Mr. Jeremy Tam. President, so what's the point? For the sake of a non-binding motion, do we want some Hong Kong people to be under tremendous financial burden, all because of the uncertainty associated with the way this bill is handled? And the extra stamp duty doesn't just have a psychological effect on buyers. Even for potential buyers, they may wonder whether this move by the administration will cause prices to go up or go down. Will the deferral of the bill cause property prices to continue to soar in the coming few months? And who is to bear the responsibility if this should happen? The administration claims that it doesn't want to send a wrong message to the market. It's not going to withdraw the measures. That's what you said. But how will the financial journals describe it or present it tomorrow? How will property developers interpret this move? We don't know, but we don't want any uncertainty to arise. If we have already got a consensus on this bill, why don't we pass it first? Somebody might have already lost because they have sold their flats earlier, while the market is booming. And then you said that no wrong message should be given to the market, and the period must be 6 months. It cannot be 9 months, and somebody might have disposed of his flat as a result, incurring loss. The loss is totally unnecessary. So long as the administration has stuck to its original plan and let this bill be discussed today, perhaps we would have already finished dealing with the bill. It might have gone through its third reading, and we might be dealing with other items on our agenda. Have you ever considered this? If the administration is willing to listen to the responses of different political parties, it would not have withdrawn the bill so hastily today. Of course. Now, I disagree that officials are also members of this council. This is very innovative. This is the first time I've heard of it. If you tell me that the agenda of a legislative sitting can be altered without prior notice, this is a big problem, because whether it be the president or members of the council, we need to prepare for the discussion items. If the administration has made up its mind to do so earlier, why hasn't it not discussed with members of this council earlier? At least the administration should alert our president instead of doing so without prior notice. Yesterday, she announced it prior to our meeting, as if it was already a favor to let us know a day beforehand. I don't believe this is a way of reconciliation with this council. Therefore, I urge the administration not to proceed with this adjournment debate. Rather, the bill should proceed as planned so that we can deal with it and then remove all uncertainties. The meeting is now adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.